heavyweight, number 29,
Welcome back to Impact Show. Sinan Kanatsis with the Internet Marketing Association here in San Clemente, California with one of my heroes in life, not just in sports, but personally speaking. I'll get into that in a second. We here at Impact Show bring people on as our guests that are making impact, not just on their industry, but on the greater world. I can't think of anyone more that I've ever interviewed than Rod Carew, who's made impact not just on his family, on his industry, on baseball, but on the world, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. But Rod, if you don't mind, take us all the way back to Panama. Tell us when you were born, how you were raised. Give us a little bit of your background.
Well, I was born on a train.
On a train?
My mom was on the way to the hospital just for a checkup. And I guess I wanted to come out and see the world, so I started kicking her. And you know, back in those days, the white customers rode in the front, the black customers rode in the back. Well, when she went into labor, I guess I was really like, I'm ready to play baseball, guys, so get me out of here and get me on my way. And there was a lady in the back. She was a nurse. And she had come, you know, she lived in Panama, but then had moved to New York. And so she came back and started helping my delivery. And then there was a doctor, a white doctor in the front of the train, heard that my mom was having a baby, and he came back and he took over from her and held me up and smacked me in my rear and
Wow.
says, "Welcome to the world."
No way. So I think you're the only person I've ever met, let alone interviewed, that was born on a train. And so you're saying that the train was actually divided by
Yes.
that is amazing.
Yes.
Imagine that in today's age, you know? I mean, you've seen a lot since then. Tell us what it was like growing up in Panama and what led you to the United States. What was that transition?
Well, you know, as I was saying about this lady that delivered me, she became my godmother. And so I didn't even know who she was or anything. And then my mother told me about her. And she was now living in New York as working at a hospital there. And she started corresponding back and forth with me.
Oh, wow.
And so I got to know her pretty good. And at that time, you know, my dad was abusing me. And she didn't like it at all. You know, she would get reports that people would see me with black and blue eyes and stuff like that. And she decided she was going to come back to Panama to check me out. Since she had delivered me and she became my godmother, she came back, and I had bruises all over my body.
Wow.
And my lip was constantly punched, so it was always
Sure.
swollen or something. And she decided that she was going to get me away from him, and she was going to bring me to this country.
Wow.
And live with her until I could get myself going and finish my high school work and stuff. And we became very close after that.
Wow. So she was almost like an angel.
Oh, yes. And also the doctor that came back and delivered me, my mother never paid a bill for him to take care of me.
Wow.
He just said, "I'm going to take care of you as long as you're living, so you are now my patients forever."
So tell me the transition to the United States and where you grew up here.
Well, and then eventually we moved to, my uncle, who was in the Air Force, brought my mom to this country, and then she brought my brother and I. And it was one of those things that, you know, we knew that we're all going to come to this country and live.
Right.
If my dad would give us permission.
Sure.
Because, you know, he was just, excuse me to say this, beep.
Feel free to roll it out. We'll take care of that.
And after coming here, she made me go to school, take all English classes because I'm bilingual. I also speak Spanish.
Right.
And so she wanted me to get rid of the Spanish, and not all of it, but I wouldn't be speaking Spanish around her.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time learning how to speak English. And she didn't allow me to play baseball for the first 2 years that I was here.
Right. And how old were you around that?
I was about 14.
14, okay.
14, 15.
Right.
And so I said, okay. I said, but I still want to play baseball.
Right.
She says, you'll play baseball when I want you to play.
Okay.
Or when I let you play.
So when did she let you?
My senior year.
Okay.
My senior year in high school, I went out and tried out for the high school team. And coach told me I wasn't good enough.
Really?
Yeah.
Gosh. And what city was that?
New York.
New York, okay.
And I knew that I could play. I knew after watching the other kids out on the field, I knew I could hit better than them. I knew that I needed work defensively, but I could always hit.
Right.
And it didn't matter to him.
Right.
But I think the reason that he did that, he was like a bird dog scout for Detroit.
Okay.
And he had about 8 guys on the team
Sure.
that he's going to recommend to Detroit.
Right.
And so I had no place in that in that class of kids that he had, even though I knew I was better than a lot of them.
Sure.
Because ever since I was a kid, it was always I played with the older kids.
Right.
I played with kids that were 4 or 5 years older than me.
Right. And that's an important point right there for all of you watching. Think about where you're going in your career, be it an athlete or a marketer or an entrepreneur. Always surround yourself with people that have already made it or are stronger than you at what you do, because that's going to lift you up. That certainly did in my career. And to Rod's point, he was playing baseball with people that were 5 or 6 years older than them. So that gives him an advantage on people that are his age. So take us through how you went from that into baseball.
And so I started playing, when she allowed me to play, I started playing with Sandlot team in New York.
Okay.
So we played all over the city, and I met this buddy of mine that was on the team. His dad was like a scout for the scout that was a scout from Minnesota.
So he was a scout.
Yeah.
Okay. That's like seriously stealth. Okay.
And he...
You will never know who that scout is. Okay.
His name was Marv Katz.
Okay.
And the other guy was a transit authority policeman.
Okay.
And so the first guy told the second guy that he need to come and watch me because, I've got some tools and he would like me. So he came out, the port authority guy came out and saw me and then followed me from there on. The twins came into town and they wanted to see who this kid was. So they took me to the stadium and had me work out with the twins. Mm-hmm. And I was hitting balls in the upper deck and stuff. And,
wow.
And then one of the manager said, "Get that kid out of there," because they didn't want the Yankees to see me.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And I played in this league right outside of the whole New York Yankee Stadium.
Okay.
And I was hitting balls up on the freeways and stuff.
Wow.
And the scout told Minnesota, he's got this kid that they need to look at and need to do something about. So when they came into town, they invited me to work out with the team, and I was just hitting the balls hard and all over the place.
Sure.
And they got me out of the batter's box and put me in the infield.
Okay.
And Billy Martin was one of the coaches at the time.
Okay.
And Billy took me out at second base and started working with me, showing me how to turn the double play. Very short lesson, but I learned a lot.
Right.
then. Defensively, I wasn't the greatest defensive player, but when you can hit,
Sure. That's all that matters.
that's all that matters. They're
Right.
looking for a bat.
Right.
So I signed with the Twins after my class graduated,
Wow.
and
So straight out of high
short,
school, you signed with the Twins?
yes.
Okay.
And the bad thing about it, I don't want to say good thing, but none of the players that my high school coach had ever made it.
Wow.
And most of them were pitchers,
Okay.
because back then they were always looking for good arms
Sure.
at a young age. And one of the reasons that I signed with the Twins is they were moving from Washington to Minnesota. And I figured, there's a big turnaround of players going through the organization because they were a new team.
Right.
And so that was the reason I signed with them, because I felt like I'll make it there quicker
Sure.
than if I went to an established team like the Yankees or
Correct.
Dodgers or whoever. And that's my career. My career began there.
And how did you discover that internal fire where you knew you were so good at baseball that you could become a pro? What was that tipping point? Where did it come from? Where did that energy come from?
Well, I used to play on this team that the firemen had, and it was fast pitch
Right.
fastball,
Okay.
softball, and I was wearing those guys out.
Okay.
My dad played on an opposite team, and I was wearing him out.
Okay.
And then when I got home, I got worn out.
Right.
He beat me from head to toe.
Sure. Sure.
So I had to tell the guys, hey, listen, when he's pitching, I can't play.
Right. Right.
So I didn't, because I got tired of getting beat up.
So that was that tipping point. Now take us through Minnesota and your life journey as you started playing professional and started posting the type of stats that you did for that age. It was really sort of an unprecedented thing. You became this anomaly. Can you take us through that and sort of your professional career?
Well, the Twins knew I could run. They knew I could hit. They knew that defensively I was going to need some work. And so Billy Martin, who was a coach with the Twins, became the guy that worked with me and pushed me and made sure I didn't make the same mistake twice, and I never alibied after I made a mistake. Otherwise, if I made a mistake, he was at the top of the stairs after the third out, and I was headed back to the dugout.
Right.
And he says, well, what happened? I said, I just messed the play up.
Sure.
He says, good. He says, because I was getting ready to tear into you.
Right.
I says, Billy, once you told me about alibis, I had made up my mind that I wasn't going to make excuses.
Sure.
I messed up, and that's the truth. He says, good.
So Billy helped rough your edges. He shaped you. He was really there as a critical point in your career. And think about your career. Think about those people like Billy, who was the manager of his baseball team, who shaped him and molded him and mentored him. We all need those in our life, in our career, in our pursuits, because we don't know everything, and it takes that sort of person that we're not related to by blood. It may not be through marriage. It's someone that's outside of your shell, and think about who those people are in your life, because that's who will shape you for excellence. Tell us how you continued that journey and at the Twins, and then eventually toward the Angels.
Well, he decided that I needed work. In 1966, when I went to spring training, he decided that we're going to spend a lot of time on my defense, on turning the double play. And he says, you're going to be a good player. He says, you're going to be one good player. He says, I've got a lot of confidence in you. And we developed a relationship. That now here's a guy that becomes my dad.
Right.
Because my dad never saw me play as a kid, even Little League games.
Okay.
The
Right.
one time he saw me play, I hit 2 home runs and I hit a double, but I also made a an error.
Right.
And so he came back after the third out and was behind our dugout and started yelling and screaming at me and grabbed me by the neck while I was thrown up. And my uncle, who had coordinated the Little League organization, saw him doing that and came over and he said to him, "You touch this kid again, you're going to have to deal with me." And that was the only time my dad saw me play as a kid.
Okay.
But as I went, going back to the Twins now, I sort of worked my tail off. You know, I worked on my defense all the time. My hitting I was never concerned about.
Right.
You know.
It was the defense.
Yeah, just my defense. And while I was working, Billy says, "You're going to make the club this year." This was 67 now.
Wow.
And he said, "I'm going to stay with you because I am going to manage the AAA club, and you might not stay with the club.
Right.
You might come down and play with me for a while
Sure.
until they can get you situated and get you learning more." And I trusted him. I says, "Okay." Well, I wasn't doing too good. I was, I don't know, hitting about 240.
Okay.
And that's the part of my game that I relied on. And he was looking forward to me coming down and continuing our work together. Excuse me. I ended up not going down to AAA. I started hitting, and I think I went like from 240 to about 350 or something like
Wow. Okay.
that. It was a big jump.
Sure.
So then the Twins decided to keep me there
Okay.
and keep me working on my defense.
Right.
And the longer I stayed, the better I got.
Awesome.
You know, and
Right.
my hitting became the top thing. So I was never, as a kid, even as a teenager, I never felt that anyone could get me out.
Right.
That's the confidence that I had. I know I can hit.
Right.
And I was more of a power hitter than a line drive hitter. You know, I decided to change my whole way of hitting.
Right.
Instead of trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark, the Twins said they need me to get on base and score runs and get base hits and don't worry about home runs.
Right. And you have this legendary stance that no one else in baseball has ever had, where you lean. Is that something that you taught yourself, or did that trademark move come from Billy or someone in your life? How did you form that position?
It came from Nolan Ryan.
Nolan, a pitcher?
A pitcher.
Whoa.
Because Nolan used to throw me this high fastball,
Okay.
and I always chased it.
Right.
But I could never catch up.
Right.
Because 1 minute it's there and then it
Sure.
disappears, you know? So I was, I think, like number 4th on his strikeout list with 29,
Oh, wow.
which happens to be my number.
I was going to
also.
say, that number keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I had to experiment. I had to do something, make an adjustment.
Okay.
So we had this little stool that swiveled. And for 2 weeks, I'd take batting practice sitting on the stool.
Oh, wow.
Because
Right, because that's throwing you off your balance. So that's giving you that challenge that Nolan's
and
giving you.
also having him bring the ball down
Right.
on me. Because if I attempted to go on this pitch up here, I had to remember I had to keep my legs bent and I had to sit and hit.
Wow.
And that's what I, eventually started telling kids, sit and hit.
Right.
What do you do when you sit on a chair?
Right.
You sit down.
Sure.
You don't sit up.
Right.
So ever since that day, I ended up hitting about 300 off of Nolan.
Wow.
But the first time I got 2 hits,
Okay.
and then he tried to entice me
Sure.
to go upstairs.
Right.
and I didn't. And then the second time, I got 2 hits again.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we're playing a game in Minnesota, and he's on the mound and he's yelling, "Stand up! Stand up!" And I yelled back, "No!" I pointed down for him to bring the pitch down.
Right.
Because I had made the adjustment that I would not swing at a pitch up here anymore.
Sure. Now, when you lean back and you do that move, does that make the strike zone smaller?
It makes, what it did for me is, because it kept me down, I was able to see the fastball down a lot better.
Okay, got it.
So I just continued that, and that's why Nolan kept yelling at me to, he didn't
Right.
want me to sit down. He wanted me to come up.
And a thought for our viewers, we all face challenges in our business or in sports or anything. Now think about that. Rod reinvented the way that he was actually swinging the bat by sitting on a stool and challenging himself. We all face those impossible circumstances in life and business. Think about ways that you can work around that detail. Analyze it. Find ways of doing it different. He did it, and it not only helped his batting average, but it helped him earn the Hall of Fame. So tell us how you took that through your career. So now that you've figured out how to get on base with Nolan Ryan, everything else probably became easy at that point, or easier, because you know that was the toughest pitcher.
Yes, it became a lot easier because what it did for me is allow my head to stay still. And, when I would take a stride and felt my body wanting to go up, I would say to myself right away, you don't need that. You
Right.
don't need that. You
Sure.
need to keep your...
Stay low.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it took a lot of discipline
Yeah.
because, when I first started, my hands were up here. And that's why I would chase a fastball.
Sure.
Now I had to bring my hands down and keep them more on a flat level to, be able to get the bat to the ball.
Rod, tell us a little bit about the bat, because the bat is a huge dynamic in this. Did you usually have a long bat, short bat? Tell us the length of the bat and how important that was.
Well, I experimented with big knob bats.
Okay.
Billy said, you try the big knob like Jackie Robinson did. And I did, and I didn't feel comfortable.
Okay.
Because my hands were kind of big too. I went to a very thin handle bat. I used to go to Louisville on my way to spring training, and they would make my bats, and they had to be thin.
Right.
No heftiness in the handle or anything.
Sure.
And so it was 34 and a half,
Okay.
32.
34 and a half, 32.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when I switched a little bit at the end of the season because my arms would get tired from swinging so much. And I decided to take my bats from 34 and a half to 34, and from 34 and a half inches to 32 ounces, and then I went down to 34, 31
Right.
inches. And, I remember talking to Ted Williams, and he had told me that if you're going to do that, make sure that when your bat's facing your eyes, make sure that there's no trademark or anything
Sure.
that you can see.
Right.
And it's going to make the bat seem like it's still the same size that you were using before.
Awesome.
And then after I did that and I played with it and I see it was working,
Right.
I kept it there in a consistent manner.
Awesome. And Louisville still is a great bat company. Just bought my son one. And, talk about a timeless brand. And in marketing, there is always a brand ubiquity leader, similar to Pedigo, who we just interviewed. And think about brand ubiquity when it comes to your company and your product. Rod, take us through Minnesota to Anaheim. Take us through your life and your career at the same time. What happened in that phase?
Well, during the time in Minnesota, I loved living there because I really thought that it was a great place to raise kids. My ex-wife is from there, and I lived there year round. I mean, 20 degrees below, 50 degrees below, that's where I stayed.
Sure.
Most of the guys would leave and go home, California, Florida, wherever, Texas. Tony Oliva and I were the only two players that stayed there in the wintertime. And we worked out a couple of months before we went to spring training. Um, it was a nice, easy, uncomplicated place to live. That's why when I see what's going on today, it just amazes me because it was never that way.
Right.
And I just stayed because I made some good friends, and we did things together. We snowmobiled, we ice fished.
Yeah, got all the weather.
Yeah, we did all that stuff. And it's still like my second home, believe it or not. I buried my first child there, and I go back to see her. When I go to the Twin Cities, I always make sure I go back and.
Could you tell us a little bit about your daughter and that chapter in your life?
She was Michelle was. She was a special kid, and she just loved people. She just enjoyed being around people. And so when we moved out to California, I remember I took them to the drive-in, and she was the only one that peeked her head in the window, and she says, "Daddy, I love California. There are no mosquitoes." Because if you went to the drive-in in Minnesota, you do not let the kids sit on top.
Okay, because of the mosquitoes.
Oh, mosquitoes eat them alive. And that was one of the reasons why I stayed in California.
Wow.
Because they wanted me to take them to drive-ins all the time.
That's sweet.
And they knew they weren't going to get bit up. But she was an advocate. "Papa, we are staying here. We're not going back to Minnesota." Or says, "Not if you guys like it here." And she was the one that really pushed me to stay in California. And I did, and I did, and I've enjoyed living here since 1978. When she became ill, I panicked, because I've never heard of the word leukemia before.
Right.
And then when I heard about her having leukemia, when the doctor said she had leukemia, I started reading about what a dreadful disease it was for kids, and the problems that they were going to go through, and you don't know if they're going to live or die. And but for the 7 months that she was at Children's Hospital, I never once saw her cry.
Right. Wow.
Never. It's when the doctors came in and they said, "Well, you have leukemia, and we're going to clean your blood up and make you well again." And all she said, "Well, let's go."
Wow. That strength in her.
Oh God, it was unreal, and she never cried.
Wow.
For the 7 months in the hospital, the only time I saw her cry, we couldn't find a marrow. Her sisters didn't match. I didn't match. My ex-wife didn't match. And so we finally went to the blood bank and found her a 4 out of 5 match. And that was the last week that she was alive. And I had gone down to the chapel, and I begged God to take her because she was in so much pain.
Right.
And I didn't want to see her in pain anymore.
Right.
And he gave us another week with her.
Right.
So now she's going to go in to get this match. And the first thing she looked at me and said is, "Dad, I'm not going to come out of that room alive." She says, I've been to where I've seen the angels.
Right.
And I'm not going to come out of that room alive.
Right.
And she didn't. Well, when when we were checking her into Children's Hospital, the kids were all running around with their poles and they're kicking soccer balls and they have their hockey sticks and they're playing hockey in the hallways and stuff like that. So then she came up to me as I'm standing at the desk and she says, "Dad, you gotta help these kids." Because she knew I wasn't, good with the press.
Right.
And I wouldn't talk to the press a lot. She says, you've got to help these kids. You've got to start talking to the press about it. So I says, okay. I says, honey, this is what you want me to do. As long as I'm on this earth, I will always take up the cause of kids, that are sick.
Right.
Because when she was in the hospital, and I was riding down in the elevator one day, and there's this little girl with her pole that was going down with her mom and dad to the store to get a treat. And this little girl said to me in Spanish, "Dios me vas a matar." And I said to her, "No, he's not. He's going to help you." "No, Dios me vas a matar." And I wanted to cry right there in that elevator. And so when it hit the first floor, I said to her before I walked up, "Dios te vas a curar." And then she said, "No." And I said, "Sí." And then I walked away. I wish I had taken the name of that little girl and family, because when she talked to me like that, I'm saying, oh, Michelle's going to go through the same things.
Right.
And he did cure her. That eventually happened, and he cured her.
Right.
He didn't cure Michelle, but then I said, he's got a special meaning or trip for her.
Right.
And that's exactly the way it turned out, because I told her, I made her a promise.
And from those years and to this day, Rod's been one of the greatest advocates of all things related to youth facing the battles of leukemia, and we'll be sure to continue to expand that through the IMA and share Michelle's request for you to our worldwide network. To the Angels and your path through Anaheim. Tell us a little bit about that journey and looking at some of the challenges that you went through with your own health.
Well, as far as living here, I thought, I'm going to look for a place that we can close to the ballpark. I didn't want to drive, 20 minutes or a half an hour to get to the park.
Sure.
And so it became someplace where we could have a neighborhood and a school that the kids are close to, and that friends that they can make, and be lifelong buddies. And so I still had my home in the Twin Cities, because I was thinking, if I don't like it in California,
You got to fall back.
Yes. But because of them,
Sure.
I stayed here, and I've enjoyed every minute of my time here in California, in Orange County. And people here have given me, they became my second family, because in sports, you have those that want to be your friends for a particular reason, and those that are going to be your friends because they really care about you. And that's what I feel here in Orange County.
And tell us how you felt coming to Orange County, which at the time was primarily Caucasian, you being African American. Did you feel any tension around that? And tell us how that has potentially changed over the years.
Well, I go back to a picture that the Angels had, that he was a Cuban guy, and when he made the team, he couldn't find a place to live because there is so much anti-Latin, anti-black in the Orange County area. But I never found that with me.
That's wonderful.
You know,
That's
I
good.
never did, because I really opened up myself to the people here in Orange County.
Right, right.
And they took me in, and um, they saw me come in here as a stranger, and they see me now as a friend, because when I go to the game, they still recognize me and give me a standing ovation or whatever. But my whole world is, since Michelle passed away, is to be helpful to people.
Right. And for our audience, being here in Orange County, California, it is one of the most diverse populations in the country. And you've got every race, walk of life here. And there's groups like the CLA that are constantly promoting our diversity. And it's such a great region because you have great climate, you've got great economy, and you have great diversity. And those are things that we will continue to share and promote, because diversity is always at the top of our priority list at the IMA. Tell us about your own health issue of a few years ago related to your heart, because that in and of itself seems like a second miracle in your life.
Well, I thought that I was going to be okay. I never had any inclination that I had any problems going on inside, that my heart wasn't bad or anything like that, until I was this buddy of mine. We were playing golf at least once a week, and he told me that he was in Las Vegas 2 weeks prior to what I was going through, that if I feel anything strange going on in my chest or anything, he says, go to the doctor right away. And I said, okay. Well, he was in Vegas, and he was playing craps, and he felt something in his chest. And he went right to the hotel doctor, and they put him in, went through some tests, and he had like a 90% blockage. And so I got up one morning after spending the evening doing a promotional thing for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, where we had people come out and walk around the stadium, and they had their different teams. And it was all about, I'm a survivor, I lost a member of my family. So we had these different balloons, and I think we must have had, I don't know, 8,000 to 9,000 people. And the night before I had my heart attack, I was out there dancing with my daughter, and pretend like I was dancing, I should say,
Right.
and my niece. And then we went home about 9:30. And so I decided I was going to get up and go play a round of golf by myself. And so I got up about 5 o'clock, and I went to this small golf course that I knew that it wasn't going to be crowded that early, and I could at least play, you know, around by myself, and with the idea is of dropping a ball every time I screwed up a shot.
Yeah.
So on the first hole, first ball I hit, the drive, was right down the middle, which was kind of unusual for me, because, it's either going this way or it's going that way. And so as I'm putting my club back into my bag, my hands get kind of balmy, and then I felt like a indigestion burn.
Sure.
And then I comes back to, Chris told me about this.
Your friend who was playing
Yes.
craps, yeah.
Yes, and so I backed my cart up to the front desk, and there's a 14-year-old boy and a lady that were getting the place ready for the golfers coming in. And I walked in, and I kind of laid down on the bench, and I says, would you please call the paramedics? And so she says, okay. Well, she got on the phone, and she was talking to someone. And this little boy says, ma'am, didn't he ask you to call the paramedics? She says, I am. I'm talking to my husband. He's a paramedic.
Oh, right.
So he must have asked her questions about what's going on with me. And then she called the paramedics. And it was like super time.
Right.
They were there. And as I am laying on the floor, they were tending to me, and all of a sudden, I heard one of them say, "Let's go, damn it, let's go. We're losing him." And I'm saying to myself, losing him? And so they brought me back,
Wow.
and the second time it happened, I was on the gurney
Right.
and I was starting to flatline again.
Right.
But as I'm starting to flatline, one of the paramedics had a light going around his whole body.
Oh, wow.
And what it reminded me of is I was laying in bed with Michelle one time, and she loved doing crosswords. And she says, "Dad," she says, "you can't see him now. You yourself can't see him, but my guardian angel is right over in that corner. He has a light going up over him,
Oh, boy.
and the light's bright, but you can't see it."
Wow.
And I remember that when I saw that light around the paramedic, that um, exactly like she explained it
Wow.
to me,
Wow.
And I think when they got me to the hospital, I was already starting to go under again.
Mm-hmm.
And, they brought me back. And I never forget those things because they were so vivid that the circumstances with the light around Michelle and then me, she must have sent a guardian angel
Right.
to take care of me.
Yes.
And he did because uh, I remember going to hospital in Riverside. Nobody knew who I was because I used this name of my buddy.
Okay.
Because when I'm out there, I don't want to be bothered. I just want to play
Right.
around.
Right.
And so um, they looked in my pocket, and I says, "My phone's in my pocket. My wife's name is Ice Honey,"
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I had her
Sure.
listed as.
Right. I see.
And then they called her, and she looked over the bed like, "Oh, he's not here."
Right.
And the next thing you know is she came to the hospital looking for me. And she wasn't worried. She told me she wasn't worried. She said she knew I was going to be okay. And I says, "Well, that's not what I was thinking."
Right.
And this woman has gone through so much with me.
Yeah.
She nursed me back from maybe not being here anymore.
Sure. Yeah. And it's so important to think about who's your partner in life, who's helping you through that, as Rod's wife helped. And tell us the path to your heart transplant and that miracle.
Well, after a while, we had a doctor from Dallas, Texas, and he came in to see me, and he's the one that gave me the LVAD, talked about the LVAD uh, that would help prolong my life as they look for a heart for me. And my wife was on top of it. She was calling people. I mean, the doctors wanted to give her a jacket, as being a nurse.
Sure.
But she just persevered. And then when she talked to this doctor from Dallas and he mentioned the LVAD that they put inside of you to keep your heart pumping and stuff, I wore one. This doctor put one inside of me for about 14 months, kept me alive for 14 months. And I could go anywhere. I could do anything. But before I could do anything, when I left, before I go on with from the hospital in Riverside, we they were going to release me, and they asked my my wife to make sure that I see a cardiologist in a couple of days because we were planning on going to Italy. And she said, okay, and she called and made an appointment, and we were lucky to get in right away. So he came over and he checked me out, and then he sent me back to Mission Hospital because he didn't like what he saw. And if I had gone to Italy in that condition, I would have died. So we went to the hospital in San Diego, and that was the turning point of being checked on. Everything on me was checked out, and then we moved to hospital in LA. And from there on, it was life or death. And I thank them. I thank all the people in this hospital and the doctor from Texas for saving my life, and for giving me a chance to live. And then I started talking to God, and I've spoken to him ever since then by, thanking him for giving me the opportunity to continue doing his work, taking care of kids, speaking about kids and their illnesses and things like that. So that's why I'm here today.
And tell us about the heart donor.
Oh, God. This kid and I met when he was about, 10 years, 11 years old.
Okay.
My son went to school with him.
Okay.
And my son was playing basketball, so I would go over and watch a basketball game. And I was outside, and I heard this kid yelling, "Hey, you're Rod Carew, aren't you?" I says, "Yes." He says, "Man, I want to grow up and be an athlete like you." I says, "Just make sure that you study and you get good grades in school." "Oh, I'm a good student, Mr. Carew." He says, "But I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be an athlete." I said, "Okay, I wish you luck." So his mother tells the story of him coming home, and he couldn't wait to tell everybody in the neighborhood that he had met me. And he was excited. And so he did grow up to be an athlete. And he did play in the NFL. And he was waiting to sign with another team. And he had a aneurysm. He was home waiting to sign with somebody else, and he was working out, and he developed an aneurysm, and that's what took his life.
Wow.
But he was, or I didn't know that, about him, that it was the same young man. So my wife had kept in touch with his mom, and at the funeral they were talking about giving his heart to me and all this stuff, and then she said she wanted someone worthy to have her son's heart.
Wow.
And so that someone was me. And I didn't have a very long time to live because the LVAD was working its way down to,
Right.
emergency time. But that LVAD had done so much for me. It allowed me to travel and do what I wanted. I had a separate unit that I traveled with, that I could plug in and be able to sleep at night. And the other part is that there's so many people that had that LVAD that didn't want to travel. So I would go to a meeting back at the hospital in San Diego and says, all you have to do is take that unit with you, plug it into the wall at night, and you get a good restful night.
Right, right.
And that's what I did. I would go back to Minnesota. I'd go wherever I went.
Sure, sure.
And
And then you got the heart transplant, and then you didn't have to rely on plugging in anymore. You were back to just being on your own. I mean, you swung into a new chapter of life.
yes, my son and his future wife spent a lot of time with me in San Diego. There's a gentleman that had a home it wasn't being used. And so instead of us back and forth from Orange County to San Diego every day, he gave us this home to use. So I was able to stay there and go for treatments and see doctors, and people cared after the story came out, because no one had seen me for such a long time, and they thought that I was dead. But Ron and I decided that we weren't going to talk about it until we get good and ready.
Right.
And then we finally did, and this gentleman volunteered, didn't have us pay a cent to live in the home. And Devin and Mary were there, and they took care of me.
Awesome.
And I think that's why I'm alive today. A lot of people cared, and a lot of people showed their love, and not because I was Rod Carew, the baseball player. I was just Rod.
Right. And this young man, Devin's friend, was also 29 years old, which was the number that you carried through your career. I mean,
Yes.
It just seems like so many stars aligning. Right?
Yeah, and it's a number that I chose as a player, as a young player.
Right.
Because they wanted to give me a single digit number. And I says, nope, I made a team with this number, and I'm going to keep it.
Is that typical to have such a young heart going into an older individual, or is it typically paired up based on age?
I think it paired up on whether it's a match or not.
A match. Okay,
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So we had a good match.
And is there any sort of personality traits that changed in you based on his heart?
Oh, yeah. I never drank coffee.
Okay.
Now I might drink, 5 or 6 cups a day.
Okay. So he was a coffee drinker, and then that came
Yeah.
along. That's amazing.
And with no sugar but cream.
Okay.
And then I became, his mom told me that he used to, leave stuff all over the place. And then I started doing that, and I was a neat freak.
Wow.
My closets, everything is lined up, it's in color.
That's amazing.
You know.
That's amazing. Well, Rod, this has just been an amazing chapter. All this is covered in your book, One Tough Out, which I highly recommend. We're going to send to our board members at the Internet Marketing Association. And I'm very excited to have your son, Devin, come on the show for a few minutes and talk a little bit about his role in your life and also your brand. It's been a true honor, and something for the audience that you may not know is Rod Carew has always been my hero, my mentor, just someone in my life that I always looked up as a child. Back in the 80s and 90s, when I would go to Angels games, my parents got me this poster of Rod because I would literally copy his stance and do every sort of thing that he would do. I would wait hours to just get my glove autographed by him, shake his hand, see him. To me, he's a symbol of my awe and my inspiration as a youth. And so much so that my father, on a teacher's salary, saved up virtually every penny he could save to get me in Rod Carew's batting school. Yeah. And that completely changed my life as playing in Villa Park Little League and also for the Villa Park High School baseball team. My batting average went up. And it's so amazing because I'm sitting here right now with you. I'm 46 years old. I run an international marketing company. And I've always said to my employees, my clients, all the people in my network, just get on first base. Get on first base and be consistent. If you are consistent, people will always be able to depend on you. So that same sort of strength that you had in your batting is what I adapted in my career from your batting school and always getting on first base. And Rod Carew was inducted in the Hall of Fame. And similarly, you can induct yourself into the Hall of Fame in your career, your life journey, if you are consistent. So I want to thank you again for bestowing that learning lesson on me. And that's something that I've been taking out to my greater world is just be consistent and always get on first base. You don't always have to be going for the home run, the grand slam. Be consistent. So with that, I present to you Rod Carew, and I'm going to now transition over to his son for a few minutes about marketing. Back here at Impact Show, so we just interviewed Rod, and I'm so stoked to have Devin here, his son, who's heading up rodcarew.com and a lot of the digital marketing. And it's not just Rod Carew's back here in the life and in an extended life and a new heart, but it's also the brand of Rod Carew. Devin, tell us a little bit about your role and how you're supporting your father in this. You're an awesome USC Marshall grad. Tell us a little bit about your background and the entry into the brand.
Yeah, so the pandemic kind of, obviously changed the world. And for my dad, it was especially tough because he was locked in his house essentially for over a year because of his heart transplant. He talked about the transplant. And when you get a transplant, you have to take anti-immunosuppressants. Mm-hmm. So it makes you very vulnerable to getting sick.
Right.
And so he had to be extra careful as everybody else had to be. He had to be even more so. And so that disconnected him from baseball. It disconnected him from the fans, from the public. And we were just talking one day, and he asked me, if there's a way for him to kind of safely reconnect, get back into the world of baseball.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, man, we've never done social media before. He even mentioned it. He didn't really, like talking to the press, but I was like, this can be on your terms.
Of course.
You can talk to people however you want, whenever you want. And so he was like, well, let's do it.
Yeah. And that was it. And then it became rodcarew.com. Got on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You have all the social media going. And we all know that sometimes journalists will take a story and skew it based on some sort of headline that they're trying to get or manufacture. This is on his terms. It's his voice. And what has that experience been like to where he's not having to face a spin on a story?
Oh, it's way better because he's got a very unique perspective. He's one of the top people at his profession of all time.
Right.
And he looks at things a very specific way, in a way that people that are like talking heads on TV or journalists, they don't see it a lot of times because they've never played.
Sure.
Or at least at that level. And so his ability to put his thoughts out there unfiltered, directly the way he wants to.
Right.
It just makes it way more enjoyable for him, but it also gives people a chance to get into the mind of somebody who otherwise they wouldn't be able to talk to or hear from.
Tell us a little bit about the book and its release and the different chapters. I think that would be really great.
Yeah, so it all kind of started when he first had the heart attack and decided when he woke up, it was like literally after he came out of the initial heart attack, that he said, I want to make sure this happens to as few people as possible ever again. And so we got involved with American Heart Association, and they sent out somebody who would kind of just document his journey from having the heart attack to the LVAD, to the heart transplant itself. And they were releasing kind of like news articles on their website. But as the story developed and kind of the miracles happened along the way, we realized that this is a story that is kind of like bigger and beyond than this kind of just individual moment.
Right.
And so we decided to take some of those articles and put it together with the rest of his life story, which is also just full of amazing moments and stories, and turn it into a book called One Tough Out. And it starts with his childhood in Panama, and talks about the child abuse that he went through with his dad, and then when he moved to New York to escape basically that abuse, playing sandlot baseball because he couldn't make his high school team, which is insane, and then his major league career, and then all the way up through Michelle and then the heart transplant.
Right. And I know Rod, you and myself, we've talked several times about this. Baseball, the way it was framed in the 70s, 80s, 90s, I mean, it was just this incredible experience. And if you go to a baseball game now, there's so much commercialization now. There's so much advertising, and the game itself has completely shifted. And I see that in a lot of pro sports. What's so nice about the book and these interviews and bringing rodcarew.com and this platform is those of us that grew up with what I consider the true era of baseball, it's kind of like bringing it back again.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Just curious.
I think so. I think a lot of people agree, and despite the massive number of people who, whenever we post something about, focusing less on maybe like some kind of stat and thinking more about, just trying to get on base, the amount of people who agree with that are like, yes, I'm so tired of hearing the opposite of that, and why aren't more people talking about this? It's kind of amazing that it doesn't get kind of the voice or the the platform that the other way of looking at it does. But our kind of goal with this, at first, like I said, it was kind of just to get him, reconnected to the world.
Exactly.
But then we realized his unique vision and his ability to, very expertly break down the way, a different way of looking at things in a positive way. We're like, this could be way bigger than just, individual social media account. This can be kind of revolutionizing the way baseball is covered
100%.
to speak to those people who are just legion.
Absolutely, and I know your father and you have these great relationships, be it Reggie Jackson, Ken Griffey Jr. There was this era of baseball that reading this book and seeing these interviews are bringing me back to, and it was so much joy in my life going to see those games at the stadium. And it's great that you guys are bringing that back to our era. And there are millions of people across the country that are now tapping into this. And I'm really excited about where rodcarew.com is going, this integrated platform that you're doing, our show, and taking this out to our network. And I want to credit Hunter Fedden, who's deeply connected into your family, obviously, as being the tipping point of starting our friendship.
Yeah.
And your fiance's name again is Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Want to give her kudos too for helping take care of Rod. And I know you're getting married in a week from today, and you're here on our show. So with that, I thank you so much, Devin. Really enjoy this partnership, and we'll be back at you, Impact Show. Thank you for tuning in.